Okay. So our second speaker of the night also has 3 really fun facts. So he broke his nose 5 times. He's lived in as many houses as years that he's been alive. And he was the captain of the silver medal winning Team Canada in Finland. Super cool. Woo! Jeremy, come on up here and share your fuck up.
Thank you. And just so you know, it was ultimate frisbee. Also, I just want to say, Dan, I have never heard somebody say that about friends, but both my fuck up and the business I currently do have both involved best friends, and I would absolutely agree that doing business with your friends works out just fine. So just wanted to throw that in there. My name is Jeremy. I run a company called Lighthouse Labs. We're coding education space, and we're kind of a sponsor, so Will did a good job of introducing us. My talk is also not at all about the business I currently run, but actually my first foray into entrepreneurship. And I'm going to give you a little bit of context about me first. I feel it's important. So I'm from Montreal. I come from divorced parents in a low income bracket. I need you to know that so you feel bad for me throughout this entire time. I basically worked a lot of jobs when I started out. So, there we go. I had a lot of jobs in Montreal. So I made St. Peter bagels in Montreal. I worked as an ice cream scooper. I worked at Blockbuster, which some people may not even know what that is. Sold razors. I even was an operator for deaf relay, so for deaf people, and helped them kind of deal with phone calls. I've done a lot of different jobs, and through all of that, I started working when I was about 12. And in doing those jobs, my goal was to save as much money as possible so I could keep up with the general Montreal nightlife that was expensive, especially when your parents sent you to a private school but told you they couldn't give you money to spend on alcohol. And so I did quite a lot of work, spent a lot of time doing it, and by the time I was 25 years old, I had saved about $25,000. I was working in a marketing agency in Toronto and felt really good about it. And I'd done that through following my grandma's way of making money, which was to spend $1, save $1, and give $1 to charity. Except the charity ended up being buying drinks for other people, and it wasn't my best moments. Anyway, so I did all that, and I tell you that because obviously I was really proud of this money, and I want you to know for this entire talk that I'm not just an entitled kid who lost a little bit of his parents' money. I was an entitled kid who lost his own money, and so it was more meaningful. And it's important to clarify. That's where the story starts. And I was 25 years old in Toronto, working in a marketing agency, and the entrepreneurial bug kind of hit me hard, and I really wanted to be an entrepreneur. I had a couple of friends and decided we would get together and we'd start a loyalty points card for the nightlife in Montreal. Even though I lived in Toronto, they lived in Montreal, they'd take care of that part. We would give away points for people to go to bars, and when they went to bars or clubs or parties or whatever, they'd get points, and they'd spend those points at bars, clubs, or on the sponsors that we kind of brought forward, or the parties that we threw. And we called it, almost, there we go. We called it the Life Series. We even made these really cool shirts that said Love Life that nobody could read. And they're excellent, excellent marketing. In building this business, we decided we were going to split 3 ways how we started this company. And each of us were going to put $10,000 in, except my 2 other partners combined had $5,000 to their name. So I floated them the rest of the money thinking we were going to be a success for sure. So what's the big deal in floating your partner's money to start the business that you want to start? And that was essentially going to be all my savings put into this to get this business going. And to be honest, it started pretty well. We had our first 4 months, June to September. We got 1,000 people to register for our cards. We got a bunch of bars and clubs coming in on it. We had sponsors come on board. We made $30,000 of revenue in our first 4 months, which at the time I was like, this is going to be amazing. We also lost $10,000 while making that $30,000 of revenue, but that was regular seed money, and I'm sure it was going to turn around. And at that time is right about where I made my big mistake. And I don't know how many people, I keep going the wrong way. I don't know how many people have seen the Fire Festival. We've been talking a lot about it at the office. And I bring it up because in this great documentary, what happened is they had this actually decent product, and they decided that the party was so important, this one big thing, and it was going to take it to the next level, but they put all their efforts into this one party that ended up quite devastatingly ruining everything. And in this case, we did something similar. We actually had the points going and so on, but we needed one party that was going to really just change everything for our entire company. And so what we decided to run was a Halloween party for the Life series. I need to clarify, it's not me in the Obama mask. I was told to clarify that, and I'm going to. And so we decided we'd throw a big Halloween party. And so we built a budget, and the budget ended up being about $60,000 to $65,000, way beyond our means. We got DJs and musicians, well beyond what we could afford, a venue that was way too expensive, alcohol, premium alcohol, because what good party doesn't have premium alcohol, and all in all we're absolutely going to be unable to afford it. So what we did is we decided to go out and ask people if they wanted to loan us money because we were sure we'd make it back. And when we went around and asked, everybody was really smart in telling us no, except my boss at the company I currently worked at in my marketing agency. And he gave me $5,000, which wasn't nearly enough to cover things, but he gave it to us as a token of, I'm sure you guys will do fine, but if you don't, I expect my money back really quickly. And okay, that's fine, we can handle that. And so it began, and the rest of the money we figured we would get from early ticket sales. As we sold tickets, we'd then be able to use that money and spend it. I see people nodding. I know, I'm here, it's vulnerable. So we get to 48 hours before my event. Everything is going great. Everything's moving along just fine. And then 48 hours before the event happens, and some stuff starts going wrong. One, the venue decides, you guys aren't that organized. We believe we need more people to clean, and we believe we need more security, because you don't seem to be on top of that. And they up our costs about $7,000. Then we have a printer who's supposed to print all our material, which is actually quite a lot at parties like this. And the printer just disappeared. We ended up finding out he had a hernia surgery, an immediate hernia surgery in the hospital, but we just couldn't get in touch with him. All our stuff was supposed to show up, we didn't hear about anything. Third, we had a lot of people wanting to show up to this event, but only 275 people that committed to tickets. We needed 800 overall. The money we were supposed to be getting from this was supposed to be paying people up front. We were freaking out. I had a lot of tough conversations with vendors and relationships of being like, yeah, just give us the stuff, we will pay. My partner has it, I don't know where he went, we sent the check. All those kind of things that are just really suck to do in the moment when you're trying to build something already that's pretty scary. And that was 48 hours before. 24 hours before the event. We got the worst email. And the email was on Friday morning, the event was Saturday. Friday morning we get an email basically saying, hey, your alcohol permit has been rejected. Yeah, it was killer. And that was my reaction. That was exactly my reaction. So it was rejected, not for any good reason. We'd submitted alcohol permits before. We knew we were good, and we didn't understand why. So the stress starting to rise, all my savings on the line, my boss's money, I have a company's reputation, people are buying tickets that I've already used their money to give vendors that are not going to give it back to me because one way or the other we have to pay them. And so we come up as good entrepreneurs with a three-pronged approach to solving this problem. Solution number one, we are going to run the party whether it gets shut down or not. We're going to go ahead and deal with the consequences. So my first partner has to go out there and continue making sure that people are giving us money for the tickets, because we really do need that money to pay other people. I know what this sounds like, and it sucks, but it was true. Two, I was going to go to a beer partner, a really small segue. I had taken the beer partner from the agency I worked at, talked with them without my boss knowing, and got them to sponsor this party. And when they sponsored the party, they said, we only sponsor one party during Halloween in Montreal a year, don't fuck it up. And here I am tonight. And so we basically got that beer partner on board. So I went to this beer partner and I said, listen, we're having a little problem with our alcohol permit. Can you help us? Really bad idea. I thought they'd have connections, maybe help us out. Instead, I got an email from the person's boss who I spoke with, and it basically said, we're embarrassed by your organization, and frankly, if you don't make this party happen, it's not successful, not only will we not be obviously sponsoring any of your further events, we'll also be pulling out from the company you currently work at, of which they accounted for about 20% of our overall revenue. Yeah, so I was stressed. It was a tough moment in my life. It's probably one of the lower moments I've ever had. And so I sat by the phone because by the phone was where our third approach was happening. And the third approach was the most charming, best looking of us three had gone down to the Regie, and if you've seen this, we didn't ask him to do anything salacious like in Fire Festival. If you heard this guy in the conference, this guy was asked to do some pretty dirty stuff to try and get something because the event was so damn important. We didn't ask him to do anything dirty, but we did say, do whatever you possibly can. Our lives depend on this. And he went down there, so I was waiting by the phone, and I remember at one point literally coming up with a plan of how I could run away and go to another country if this didn't work out, and then thinking that was ridiculous and not doing it, but I did have that moment of thought. All to say, I got the call about an hour and a half after he'd gone. He's sitting there depressed, and he calls and he says, Jer, I have some good news and I have some bad news. And I'm like, okay, please, just give me the good news first. Like, I just need something good. And he goes, we got the permit. And I was so excited, and I said, how did you do it? And he said, all I had to do was cry aggressively for 15 minutes. And this nice older lady listened to me, and she kind of signed the permit, but he's like, I do have some bad news. And I was like, okay, what's the bad news? And she's like, well, she said that the reason it wasn't accepted was, in her words, unsavory characters have some influence in this department, and they made sure that it got rejected. And if I were you, I wouldn't run this party, because if they want to shut you down, they'll find other ways of shutting you down. And that was the message that I got right then and there. And that's usually the time when you decide to pack it in, say, you know what, this isn't for me. But there was just way too much riding on this, and at this point, you're full throttle in, and I don't know what I was really thinking, but we decided to go ahead with it. So Saturday, no going back. We actually ran the party, and it was actually not a bad party. I wouldn't have known, because I spent the entire evening eyeing every person that came in a costume, trying to figure out if they were the one who was going to fuck up our event. And unfortunately, about 10% of those people show up in mafia costumes, and you probably know it's not them, but you're not 100% sure, so you're staring them down. And then also, we'd only sold 600, 800 tickets, so I knew I was going to lose money, and I was in the back just trying to figure it out. It was honestly an awful experience. Like, jokes aside, I was having a really rough go of it. And we ended the party, and we lost about $15,000 total, which was way better than it could have ended up. There was no attack, no anything happened that evening, thank God. And I even had the money to pay back my boss. So I actually felt like, okay, we've made it through. And actually my mind went to, what do I do next to make this company go forward? The party was actually pretty good, and our credibility had kind of grown. So I even had thoughts that this could happen again until I got into my office on Monday morning. And when I got into my office on Monday morning, my boss pulled me aside, he sat me down, and he went, listen, the beer company that is our client has actually called me and told me that they're pulling out of working at our company, and because of that, you're fired. And that was like a minute where I realized I'd lost all my money, I'd been fired, I'd lost stuff for my company, which I cared a lot about, and probably like in this whole story, legitimately the most sad I'd ever been for that 1 minute before he started laughing, like literally 60 seconds before he started laughing, and said they did call him and they told him about it, but they didn't pull out, and he's not firing me. But if he ever found out again that this is that I had pulled a client, firing would be the least of my problems, because there's a lot of legal stuff that comes along with that would have been problematic. And he also told me that as long as I worked for him, I could not run a startup. And there was a second where I went like, well, maybe I don't have to work for you. And then I realized I had no money, and I really needed the job. And also I'd been threatened by, mafia, and lost money. I was like, this is stupid, I'm gonna stop. And that should have been the end of it. Except that I got an email later that afternoon, and it was an email, I don't know I didn't know whose address it was or anything, and all it said was, congratulations on getting your permit. We let you have this event. We don't expect you to have another one. And it had a picture of me in the back room counting money at the party, which no one was supposed to have access to. And it also had my name, phone number, and home address, along with my 2 business partners. And I remember shaking. I remember being really fucking scared of that moment. Also having lost my money, just kind of thinking, what the hell did I do? And the mistake was just kind of like killing me. I probably spent a few weeks weeks looking over my shoulder, little things were like getting to me. Overall, it really messed with me. I still to this day have no idea if it was real or if it was just someone who's a really good impersonator. You never do know, but I know that for me in my life, that was probably one of my lowest moments. And in the moment, I really thought, like, man, how could you fail so badly? Like, you know, up until actually kind of Dan said before, like, you do have a little bit of air invincibility when things are kind of moving along and going well, and that definitely sucked it all away. So I decided to tell this story. So, by the way, we did not run any other events and did not do we didn't do anything. But I decided to tell this story for a couple reasons. One, there's some basic lessons that I can share that are pretty obvious. One, do not shit where you eat. And I mean that by, if you're going to run a startup, when I ran my second startup and went to build Lighthouse Labs, I quit my company and I went and started a startup. And committing fully to the company that you want to run is actually really important. Jumping in as much as you can, and definitely not borrowing stuff from the company you work at to the company you're starting. Now, I see people laughing. I actually hear about this all the time. It does happen. It makes sense. You have things you can leverage and use. It puts a lot of pressure on you in a situation where you are already in a lot of pressure, which is starting a company. So my suggestion is, do not do that. I know I had a terrible experience. Two, don't loan your partners their seed investment money. What's an underlying thing in all of this is I was about to lose all the money I'd worked for 25 years in. And actually, if I'd only put the $10,000 originally in, and each of my partners had put $10,000 in, it would have sucked, but I would have had something in behind. And another thing I do hear quite a lot is it's not that much money, which it's not, putting in for your partners, but the pressure and the situation immediately evolved into, this is my money, they don't have anything in this, and it got me to a different level of freaking out than anyone else. That made a lot of bad decisions. There's situations where the decisions were tough and bad, and put a lot of pressure in places it didn't need to be. Three, it's a simple one, don't base a startup on a Montreal nightlife. I think that one is a personal one. That's a good lesson for me. If you want to go for it, go for it. I just know that I would never do it ever again. Those are the basic lessons. The actual reason I decided to tell this story is because I've actually fucked up a lot. I've made a lot of mistakes, as I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs have. But this one isn't some kind of fuck up in a business sense where you can learn a shitload of lessons from and you can do some great things. This is something that hopefully is relatable to a lot of people, because I really do think this is the kind of dumb mistake that if I'd looked at it right from the start, and when I tell this story, I'm like, yeah, I should have known right from the start not to do this. Like, this is a pretty easy mistake to avoid, and yet we all make easy mistakes that we can avoid, where we go, you know what, if it doesn't go bad, this is actually something that can go really well. And I do talk to a lot of people that have had those moments. And for me, that was really important to think about, because now when I look back on it, I realize also how little I should ever be defining myself by my failures or my successes, really. And I think that's what this whole event is, and Fuckup Nights is for, is really to make sure that people understand that when I was at my absolute lowest moment and when things were so bad, I definitely would have thought that that would have been a defining moment in my life if that had gone badly. But in reality, it's not your important moment unless you let it define you, because I can tell you, having started Lighthouse and gone on, not one person has ever brought up this situation. Nobody has talked to me about this company. Nobody's talked to me about my mistakes. And it's the same kind of mentality I take when we're actually finding success and moving forward, is success and failure are all part of trying to build something great, but really it's actually about sticking to what you care about, what you know how to do, and also maybe always stopping whatever you're going to do if anyone in the mafia is coming after you. And that's where I'll stop tonight. So thanks everybody.
Jeremy, thank you so much for sharing that story. It really made me happy with the fire theme that you went. Maybe some of you guys were in our audience last week. We actually did a special event for our community where we did a screening of Firefest, and then we had a discussion of all the fuck-ups in that documentary. And if you weren't there, make sure that you're following us on social and that you're on our mailing list so you don't miss out on fun events like that. And secondly, this talk really gave me heart palpitations as an event planner, as somebody who's planning our second year anniversary at the end of March. Guys, please grab your tickets. Early bird ends on Tuesday. It's open bar, it's gonna be a lot of fun, and let's hope it's not Firefest. I think it's gonna be great. Jeremy, thank you again for sharing all of those great lessons. We're so happy to have you as a speaker and as a partner. And let's open it up for Q&A. So we're gonna have a couple of mic runners and let's get some great questions.
How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Paul.
We're brother from Vancouver. Hey, awesome Prezzo. Did not hear about this story back when we were bad, but happy to hear it. What I drew from this is that you were really in inertia, and I find that many entrepreneurs kind of have this mindset of, like, I'm going to get it done because there's a lot of pressure on me because I just have to do it, and a lot of people persevere through that, but there's a point where you need to quit, right, or do a dramatic pivot. So what's your advice to people around when they're kind of too deep, and what is too deep as far as, you know, pivoting, quitting, or persevering? Do you have any kind of advice on that?
Yeah, I have actually a great question. I actually, in my head, I always have the song, you gotta know when to hold them and know when to fold them, and you know, it sounds funny, but it is true. Like, I'm constantly trying to assess that question in pretty much everything. In my current business, that's a question all the time. We, as Will said, like, we embrace making mistakes, trying things, doing things well, and going full throttle at stuff, and we have to know when to just say, okay, like, it's not working, let's stop. My best advice is actually what, again, like this whole night tries to show, which is honestly pulling out and stopping whatever you need to stop because you know that that's the right decision is the right decision. Never feeling so much pressure that something has to absolutely 100% work. And I say that, I'm still absolutely somebody who finds myself in those situations all the time. So it's not really something that I can tell you to act, you know, just when you know, just stop. I think just like a good marriage, you know, I hear friends all the time tell you like, oh, you know, I knew we should have been divorced 3 years ago. And my answer usually is, well, I'm so glad you lasted 3 more years because you owe it to a marriage to really figure that out. Sometimes the answer when you're trying to do something is you do end up going a little further than you want to. But I will say, being able to honestly and openly assess that for yourself and ask yourself those questions on a regular basis and not do it for the wrong reasons of shame or feeling fear of what happens if it doesn't. I know I make those decisions usually because I think I can do it, not because I'm worried if I can't do it. And that's kind of maybe the best thing I can say is focusing on what you believe you can do and if it's worth doing, but not the mistake or the negative of what comes if you can't accomplish it.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Paul.
Hey man, that was awesome. How did you make, you were like working in a marketing company and, you know, I know how this business sort of wrapped up, but now you have this new business. Like how did you start? How did you initially say, I want to do something again, quit, to get fired?
Yeah, I mean, I took a couple years. There was definitely a couple years in between it where I kind of was working this agency and kind of moved up towards director of marketing. I should say, like, my career in this agency went really well afterwards. So my boss is a great person and allowed me to make those mistakes. And then I actually had, you know, I'd been doing a lot of BD and talking with some different companies. And my best friend, who I currently work with, came to me with kind of this idea of running a coding bootcamp because I'd always put out there that I cared about education. And actually helping teach people, and you know, in all forms. I actually had a challenge with teachers originally, like not that I had a challenge with them, but I wanted better certifications for them. I wanted them to make more money. I thought it was ludicrous that the whole system pays teachers really weakly and lawyers and doctors, you know, don't. But that's a different story. All to say, by putting that out there on a regular basis, my partners kind of came to me. My current partners came to me and asked me if I wanted to join, and they actually told me I'd come back from a trip, and they basically said, hey, we need to know in the next like week and a half, and you need to move out of Vancouver within the next month. And I worked for this company for 7 years. So I did a lot of research, as much as I could, within kind of a week, and spent a lot of time looking at everything I could into tech space, coding. I knew nothing about tech and coding, but I had the marketing background, and ultimately the reality was I just felt I was at a point in my career where I was making $75,000 a year. My salary was good enough, and that I felt that I could go back into. I had a safety net of I could probably get that job again in 6 to 8 months if it wasn't working, and so felt like I could take that risk because actually running this business definitely hit me pretty hard from a risk factor, and I probably was going to be much stronger on assessing my next opportunity. There's a couple that had come up in between that I'd actually said no to. and this one just sounded right because it hit all the things I actually cared about, other than the fact that it was technology and code, which I was actually just learning about at the time, and it worked out really well. Obviously, went out to Vancouver, had to start from the ground up, and just kind of talking to companies and seeing if they'd even be open to interviewing people who'd gone through a boot camp, and talking to people who wanted to learn, and seeing if they'd be interested in dropping $7,000 on a course, which luckily one of our business partners was a great curriculum writer and a dev, and had written a curriculum before for a boot camp, and so it was really trustworthy in kind of what he was doing, and that was another thing that came out of this, was like I wanted nothing to do with anything, but something that was very, very trustworthy, and something that really quality, and those two things were really important to me going to the next piece.
So did you have like a gap of time where you're not making any money and you're just living on fumes and savings?
Yeah, I went down on, we went down, I think I made like $10,000 a year for the first 5 months of Lighthouse to start on my salary, so just enough that I could rent an apartment. Actually, I think I stayed on the couch of both a friend, I was actually house swapping, like a couch of friends and another couch of one of my other partners who had enough money because of his previous job that he got an apartment. Probably did that for 3-4 months. My wife came and followed me 4 months later and joined me in Vancouver because I said, actually, I think this is a thing, so maybe you can move to Vancouver. So that was actually, we spent 4 months apart on that. And then we actually did hit like a decent amount of revenue, and people pay you kind of for the school. So before there, you could take the service. So we knew what our cohorts were looking like in the next couple. And that was about the time when my salary could change to $50,000 a year, which is where, it just slowly kind of moved from there. But there was definitely a bunch of time where I had no money, but I'd saved enough, and I believed in what I was doing. Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. So we'll do one last question, just in the interest of time.
Or none.
Oh, I saw, yeah, there's one right there.
Hey man, Raheel, great presentation, really hilarious. My question was, what made you want to move from Montreal to Toronto and back? Was it the mafia or?
I was already in Toronto at that point, but no, Montreal. I wanted something different, I guess. I lived in the same place. I went to university in Montreal. I'm from Montreal. I love the city. I'm English first. I speak French fluently, but I'm English first. I realized I was actually a much bigger asset in Toronto, being able to deal with business that included Montreal while in Toronto, because I could speak French fluently as opposed to being in Montreal, I think. And I just wanted a different challenge. Toronto in Canada is, one of those cities that's kind of have to work pretty hard to make it. Montreal is one of those cities where if you have the right friends and the right contacts, you can actually do pretty well, because everyone kind of it's a tight-knit community in a different way. And I've thought about going back at different times. I've now lived in Vancouver and Toronto, also lived in Vancouver as well. But ultimately, I kind of love living in Toronto. It's the kind of city that makes you feel like, there's so much going on. You're both nothing, and every time you do anything of any significance, you're like, oh wow, I did that in Toronto, and that's really, really cool. And I love the people I meet here. That's what I kind of moved back from Vancouver from. I think I love the people here in Toronto more than anywhere else. And so yeah, it was a lot of different decisions, I guess. But I should probably mention, especially because she's here, that my girlfriend, who we were just starting a date, was living in Toronto, so it made moving a lot easier when I moved from Montreal.
Thanks.
Awesome. That was such a nice note, Ted. Thanks, Anne. Thank you so much, Shane.